evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
The only channel that gets you the complete picture. As Russia's invasion of Ukraine continues, we get you all the voices that matter. From inside Kyiv to the view from the United States,
discussions simply aren't going to help.
to what Europe is planning. Our reporters have all sides covered.
When the news doesn't stop, why should we? The war is on in Ukraine, but the story of this war is being shaped in multiple capitals, in Brussels, in Moscow, in Washington, D.C., New York, in London, and many others. And we are bringing you the very latest from all these cities with our correspondents. Tonight, we begin with a headline we wish we did not have to report. An Indian student has been killed in a Russian attack in Kharkiv. Our thoughts and prayers with his family. And our message to the thousands of others still stuck in the war zone: hang in there, the evacuation effort is picking pace. 4 union ministers are on the ground to oversee the safe return of Indians. We are also looking at how the attacks have intensified. The Americans say Russia's invasion is running behind schedule and that Vladimir Putin is losing patience. What are world powers doing? Issuing more statements, trying to punish Russia on all fronts. It's a slow bleed. It will hurt Russia eventually, but not end the war immediately. And that may actually benefit the West. The military-industrial complex stands to gain. Their business is already picking up. Meanwhile, Russia is being accused of using banned weapons and sending private killers to take down the Ukrainian president. Moscow, of course, has denied all of this. Whichever way this ends, this war will change our world. Force more countries to arm themselves and leave many more Ukrainians suffering. On Gravitas tonight, we'll bring you all that you want to know about Day 6 of the Russian invasion. This is not a story we wanted to report. This afternoon we got a grim news flash. An Indian student has died in the Ukraine conflict. It happened in Kharkiv. It is the second largest city of Ukraine. Russia intensified its attacks to take Kharkiv today. The Indian student was killed in one such Russian attack. His name is Naveen Shekharappa, finally a medical student. He was from Karnataka in India. The war had forced Naveen to live inside metro stations. Metro stations are doubling up as bomb shelters in Ukraine. This morning, Naveen left the safety of a metro station to buy some supplies. He was at a supermarket near the city center. That's when the Russians struck. Those were the pictures from the city center in Kharkiv. Now, we cannot say for sure if Naveen died right at this moment. Going by one claim, he was shot by the Russian army when he was standing in a queue. We cannot verify that either. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke with Naveen's family and expressed condolences. We have access to video. It is believed to be Naveen's last conversation with his family.
Building ಅದರ ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಶೋ ಮಾಡ್ರಿ ನೀವು ಫ್ಲಾಗ್ ಅವ್ರು ಅದನ್ನೇ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು ಮಿನಿಸ್ಟರ್ಗಳು ಎಷ್ಟು ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಫ್ಲಾಗ್ ಹಿಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಹೇಳಿ ಅಂತರಿಗೆ
ಈಗ ಬೆಳಗ್ಗೆ ಟಿಪ್ಪನ್ ತಂದಾರ ಈಗ
It's an extremely unfortunate turn of events. Russia is pounding Ukraine now, and things may get worse. Russian missiles are targeting civilian areas, and Indian students are in the line of fire. New Delhi's evacuation mission is on. Sources say 9,000 citizens have been taken out of Ukraine so far. But thousands more still remain stuck in the war zone, and they're in some of the most violent hotspots. I'm talking about cities like Kiev, Kharkiv and Mariupol. How will India ensure their safety? Can all Indian students and citizens be rescued? Has the time come for India to ditch neutrality and pick a side in this conflict? On Gravitas tonight, we'll discuss all of this and more. First, the aftermath of today's tragedy. The death of an Indian student has forced New Delhi to respond. Ambassadors of both Russia and Ukraine were summoned. India has demanded safe passage for all Indian nationals. But how will this safety be ensured? So far, neither side has made any commitments to secure Indians. The Indian mission in Kiev has issued a new advisory. All Indians, including students, have been advised to leave Ukraine today itself. Again, the question is, how will they do that? No planes are flying in and out of Ukraine. The only options at this point are land routes by road or train. India is seeking the help of Ukraine's neighbors, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Romania. Indian missions in these countries have sent diplomats to their borders. They are stationed at these 5 border checkpoints and they're facilitating the evacuation of Indians. It's impossible to get out all of them immediately. That is a fact. This is a war zone. And situations tend to become unsavory. Last night we showed you some images, Indian students being harassed and abused by soldiers. These are pictures from the Ukraine-Romania border. More than 100 students are still believed to be there, waiting to be evacuated and being targeted by agents, they say.
हम लोग अभी केपीपी टीसा बॉर्डर पे हैं। यहाँ पर बहुत भारी संख्या में स्टूडेंट मौजूद हैं, आप देख सकते हैं। और हम लोगों को कल से इन्फॉर्मेशन बताया जा रहा था, कोई एक एजेंट है जो हम लोगों को ये इन्फॉर्मेशन बता रहा था एम्बेसी का हवाला देते हुए कि आप जाइए, ओडेसा से आपकी ट्रेन है, आपको उस छोड़ेगी और वहाँ से आप जो सामने बॉर्डर देख रहे हैं वो उस बॉर्डर को सक्सेसफुली आप क्रॉस कर सकते हैं।
We haven't been able to independently verify any of these claims. India's Ministry of External Affairs has set up a special Twitter helpline for evacuations. It's got hundreds of SOS calls already. All major Ukrainian cities are blocked. Russian forces are closing in from all directions. With airports shut, no country is in a position to pull out thousands of citizens at once. Despite the obvious challenges, India has not called off its evacuation mission. Compare this to other countries. They've refused to evacuate their own people. The United States is one of them. In a recent advisory, the US State Department refused to evacuate its citizens from Ukraine. Same with the UK. British citizens are on their own. Last month, their government told them to, quote-unquote, not expect any military evacuation. British citizens in Ukraine were asked to leave through any possible means. So while Indian students are in a dire situation, they must not lose hope. Some of them have been exemplary. Medical students from India, we are told, are helping out injured Ukrainians. One of them has refused to leave the country. She said she wants to help out her landlord, who has voluntarily joined the Ukrainian army. Her name is Neha. She is from Haryana in India. She had the option to leave, but she decided to stay back. She's helping out her landlord's wife and children. Allow me to quote what she said. I may live or not, but I will not leave these children and their mother in such a situation. Neha's father was a soldier too. He served in the Indian Army and died a few years ago. And there are more stories like these. Another student is from Kerala who decided to rescue a dog while she was being evacuated. She refused to abandon him. And it's important to dwell on these stories of courage and hope, especially in tough times, because when hope is lost, all is lost. So I shall repeat what I said last week. Our message to the Indians in Ukraine is this: your country is rooting for you and we can't wait for you to return home. What will worry India, though, and the world is this: Putin is cranking up the Russian war machine. Until now, it was on autopilot. The airstrikes were limited, the deployments were basic. But now we are seeing a more aggressive Russia, a more dangerous Russia. Let me show you some satellite pictures. What you're looking at is a Russian convoy. What is in this convoy? Military vehicles, tanks, supplies, and reinforcements. How long is this convoy? Around 64 kilometers long. Let me repeat that. This Russian convoy is 64 kilometers long. How far is it from Kiev? Last we checked, the convoy was here, around 20 kilometers north of the presidential palace in Ukraine. And this is some serious firepower we're talking about. What is Kiev's plan of action? If the satellites can see the convoy, if we can see it, why are the Ukrainians not taking it out? Well, we can think of two reasons. A, they do not have the air power to wipe the convoy out. Or B, they feel Kiev is their best bet. Better to defend the city than to openly engage. Whatever the plan, this convoy looks ominous. And right now, it is inching towards the capital. But Kiev is just one front. In the last 24 hours, Russia has escalated the offensive all over Ukraine. This map should give you a better idea. Notice the areas in red. Those are controlled by Russia. You have a corridor from the north reaching down to Kiev. And this is Chernobyl. And this is where the convoy is coming through. Down south, you have another corridor developing from Crimea to rebel-held Ukraine. Only one city stands undefeated there, and that is Mariupol. If Mariupol falls, the southern corridor will be complete. The third front is the northeast, and there too one city stands resolute, the city of Kharkiv. It was recaptured by Ukraine after intense fighting. So there are two ways of looking at this. One, it's just day 6 of the invasion. In military terms, that's early days. Or two, it has already been 6 days. Russia was expected to steamroll the Ukrainian army. Clearly, that's not happened. It's not happened yet, at least. The United States is pushing the second theory. They say Russia is running behind schedule. They expected a swift victory. Instead, they're getting bogged down. So what is Putin planning to do? According to the US, he's planning to escalate more deployments, more airstrikes, and this time everything and everyone is fair game, including civilians. Kharkiv is bearing the worst of it. Let me show you that chilling video released by the Ukrainian government. It shows a Russian missile attack an administrative building. This is how it played out. Like I said, chilling. Ukraine says 10 civilians were killed in the attack, plus 35 injured. Kharkiv today is a city under siege, basically a sitting duck for Russian strikes. This is what the city square looks like. Debris all around, buildings barely left standing, emergency workers running around frantically, and the occasional fire yet to be put out. What explains this wave of violence against Kharkiv? Perhaps it's history. Kharkiv is made up predominantly of Russian speakers. It was the capital of Soviet Ukraine. It is known as the cultural, educational, and industrial capital. After Kiev, the city is the biggest prize. By Putin's logic, it should have been a cakewalk. Just think about it. Kharkiv is made up of Russian speakers. It is located close to the Russian borders. Yet, there is fierce resistance. What does that tell you? That Ukrainians have a distinct identity. Some of them may speak Russian, but their loyalty is to Ukraine, and Kharkiv is proof of that. Putin's plan is to bomb the city into submission. So he is targeting civilian areas. Let me show you two sets of pictures, both from different residential sectors in Kharkiv. Notice the line of smoke and blasts. That is evidence of cluster bombs. Both Ukraine and the European Union have called it a war crime. We'll discuss that in a bit. But for the moment, let's pull back to the larger picture. What is Putin's new game plan? In one word, it is escalation. The massive convoy heading to Kiev, the relentless bombing of Kharkiv. If you ask the Americans, they think Putin is losing his mind, that he's getting nervous. But could there be logic to this escalation? Well, some experts say yes. Russia practices a strategy called escalate to de-escalate. What does that mean? Your enemy is settling into the fight. They're repelling your attacks. But suddenly, you escalate, maybe with a massive airstrike or relentless bombing. The idea is to shock your enemy, and that shock will force them to de-escalate, maybe sue for peace. Is Putin using this strategy in Ukraine? The fact is we cannot be sure. But indications are that he is losing patience. And that makes Putin more dangerous. Whatever the end game of this escalation, we can be sure of one thing. The apartments, the bunkers, the civilian buildings, everything is on Russia's radar. The tide of war could soon be shifting. And it's shifting at the expense of Ukrainian lives. So here's the thing. Putin thought Ukraine would be a cakewalk. He was wrong. We thought this war would end. We too were wrong. It is day 6. Ukraine is still being bombed, shelled, and hit by missiles. And all that the world has to offer is a limbo. Take the United Nations, for example. It is meeting every day, every single day. Statements are being delivered every day. But to what end? If the failure to make advances has frustrated Russia, the collective failure to stop this war seems to have frustrated Ukraine. This is what their ambassador told the United Nations.
If Ukraine does not survive, the United Nations will not survive. Have no illusions. If you want to just visualize the magnitude of the tragedy, you have to imagine next to you, next to every nameplate of every single country in this General Assembly, more than 30 souls of killed Russian soldiers already. Next to every name of every single country in this assembly. 30 plus killed Russian soldiers. Hundreds of killed Ukrainians. Dozens of killed children. And it goes on and on and on.
The second soundbite you heard was from a special session of the United Nations General Assembly. More than 100 countries are attending this emergency meeting, and at least 100 are expected to speak. The idea is to pass a resolution to ask Russia to withdraw its troops. So far, the United Nations has been successful. When Russia attacked Ukraine, a draft resolution was proposed at the Security Council. The idea was to end the invasion. Russia blocked it. Then a Human Rights Council meeting was called. The idea was to address the human rights violations. Russia attended the session and dismissed the concerns. And now a special session of the UNGA, United Nations General Assembly, has been called. On day 1, Ukraine's ambassador appealed to the Assembly's emotions. Focus on the loss of lives on both sides. The ambassador read out a text message. It was written by a Russian soldier to his mother just moments before his death.
Не на учениях.
Alyosha, how are you doing? Why has it been so long since you responded? Are you really in training exercises? Asks the mother of a soldier moments before he was killed. Mama, I'm no longer in Crimea. I'm not in training sessions. Where are you then? Papa is asking whether I can send you a parcel. What kind of a parcel, Mama? Can you send me? What are you talking about? What happened? Mama, I'm in Ukraine. There is a real war raging here. I'm afraid. They are bombing all of the cities together, even targeting civilians. We were told that they would welcome us, and they are falling under our armored vehicles, throwing themselves under the wheels, and not even allowing us to pass. They call us fascists. Mama, this is so hard.
Mama, мне очень тяжело. In several moments he was killed.
Earlier this evening, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the European Union Parliament. He asked European leaders to prove that they were indeed standing with Kiev.
We have proven our strength. We have proven that, as at a minimum, we are exactly the same as you are. So do prove that you are with us. Do prove that you will not let us go. Do prove that you indeed are Europeans.
He got a standing ovation for that speech. But will he get the EU membership? Zelensky has signed the papers to join the European Union. The road to the bloc is a long one. There are multiple criteria, numerous formalities. Croatia, for example, took 10 years. 10 years to join the EU. Ukraine wants a fast-track entry. Why? Because joining the European Union could help Ukraine militarily. EU nation states will be bound by the Mutual Defense Clause to help Ukraine. Currently, its cities are being bombed. Civilians are dying. Foreign nationals are dying. The people of Ukraine are putting up an unbelievably strong front. But for how long? A resolution is the need of the hour, and it is the job of the United Nations to deliver one. So far, the world body has only delivered statements, and I see no point in playing them out for you. Instead, let's look at what's happening in Ukraine. Russia has bombed Kharkiv. 4 people died when they'd stepped out to fetch water. A family with 3 children was burnt alive in their car. Several others have lost their lives. Ukraine is calling for a ceasefire. Kiev recently held talks with Moscow. The two sides met on the border. Ukraine called for a ceasefire and the withdrawal of Russian troops. Russia did not comment. What does the Kremlin want? Putin laid out his terms to French President Emmanuel Macron. He demanded the demilitarization of Ukraine. He also wants the West to recognize Crimea's sovereignty. It's a tall ask. Coming back to the border talks, there was no breakthrough. The only thing the two sides could agree on was to continue talking. Reports say the second round of talks will be held on the 2nd of March. But here's the irony. While the first round of talks was underway, Russia continued shelling Kharkiv. The Kremlin spoke with its actions. It sounded like this. Russia was not interested in a ceasefire. But the Kremlin will be helping itself by declaring one. It is suffering losses in all possible forms. The Russian ruble is tanking. With every fresh attack, NATO and its allies are heaping fresh economic sanctions on Russia. We will get to the details in a bit. For now, you must know this. The Russian ruble has hit a record low. Currently, 1 ruble is worth less than a cent, $0.0099 to be exact. A pretty complicated number there, but here's what it implies. Very soon, the people of Russia will be paying out of their pockets for their president's decision to go to war. That's because financial penalties are being imposed on Russia. And they've started disrupting the country's economy. The Moscow Stock Exchange has been shut for 2 days now. Investors are divesting themselves of Russian interests. The government's borrowing, the borrowing costs of the Russian government have doubled to 17%. The S&P credit agency has downgraded Russia to junk status. And to make this economic blowback worse, a number of multinationals are severing ties with Moscow. This includes energy companies, tech giants, banks, production houses, sporting bodies. A host of them have decided to suspend operations in Russia. JP Morgan says if this trend continues, Russia could soon enter a recession. Here's a report.
Today, I'm authorizing additional strong sanctions and new limitations on what can be exported to Russia.
And Russian leadership will face unprecedented isolation.
We are now progressing at the second phase of those financial sanctions.
Les sanctions portées à la Russie seront à la hauteur de l'agression dont elle se rend coupable.
We will weaken Russia's economic base and its capacity to modernize.
日本はプーチン大統領を含むロシア政府関係者
With new financial measures, we're taking new powers to target Russian finance.
As attacks continue in Ukraine and Russian forces press their advance, the West has unveiled a series of sanctions. To deprive Putin of the funds he needs for this war, they've targeted Russian banks, oligarchs, businesses, oil refineries, and military exports. These financial penalties have already disrupted the Moscow Stock Exchange and sent the Russian currency cratering more than 30%. A sharper economic fallout is expected in the days ahead. JP Morgan says Russia could even enter a recession. To make this economic blowback worse, the corporate world is also severing ties with Russia. A host of multinational companies have taken some big steps. If we speak of oil companies, energy giant Shell has decided to exit all Russian operations, including its partnership with Russia's state-owned Gazprom. Norwegian energy firm Equinor is also divesting its joint ventures in Russia. It will be abandoning a deal it struck almost 30 years ago. If we speak of tech giants, Dell has suspended all product sales in Russia. Intel is suspending chip shipments to Russia. Facebook parent company Meta has barred Russian ads on its website. Twitter too has restricted access to Russian handles in Europe. And Google has banned Russian state media from collecting ad money from its websites, apps and YouTube videos. Then we have financial institutions. British bank HSBC is winding down relations with several Russian banks. The New York Stock Exchange has temporarily suspended trading for Russian companies. Nasdaq too has barred Russian-owned firms from trading on its exchanges. The list doesn't end there. FIFA and UEFA have barred Russia from all international competitions. The IOC has banned both Russian and Belarusian athletes from competing. Formula One has cancelled this year's Russian Grand Prix. Transport giants FedEx and UPS have suspended their shipments to Russia. America's Delta Airlines has halted its alliance with Russia's Aeroflot. Disney has paused theatrical releases of its films in Russia. Netflix has suspended its streaming of all its services. And singing competition Eurovision will not allow any Russian acts this year. Even the president of Russia hasn't been spared. In 2013 he was conferred with an honorary black belt by World Taekwondo. The organization has now stripped him of this honor. It has also refused to recognize any Taekwondo events in Russia henceforth. Now, here's the thing. Some of these measures may be purely symbolic. They may not inflict serious economic damages on Russia, but they send a message to Moscow that there can be no place for such naked aggression in today's world.
They say war is an ugly business. It's true, unless of course you're a businessman, in which case war is great business. You can sell more weapons to more people, and who knows that better than the West? They have waged war all over the world, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in North Africa, and now a new theatre has emerged, Ukraine. More than a dozen countries have promised military aid to Ukraine. Here's a quick look. The United States has pledged $350 million, the European Union $502 million, Australia $50 million, Canada $33 million, and these are the latest promises. The total assistance since 2014 is much higher. Additionally, European states are pitching in. The Netherlands is sending Stinger rockets and anti-tank missiles. Finland, a neutral state, is sending 1,500 rocket launchers and 2,500 assault rifles. Belgium is shipping 3,000 rifles and 200 anti-tank weapons. Simply put, it is a lot of firepower. But what if they're not enough? What if Russia still takes Kiev? Well, then the insurgency begins. Ukrainians have shown their spirit of resistance. Even if Russia wins, there will be opposition, and that opposition will be funded by the West. A large part of that funding will be weapons, guns, handheld rockets, body armor. We've seen it happen in Afghanistan, in Iraq, then again in Yemen, and chances are we will see this in Ukraine. If you look at the world's top 10 weapons manufacturers, 7 are from the West. 6 American companies and 1 British. We took a closer look at their share values since the Russian build-up began. We'll start with Lockheed Martin. On November 1st, it was trading at $330. Today, $433 per share. That's a 31% rise. Next is Northrop Grumman Corporation. On November 1st, it was trading at $354. Today, it's at $442. That's almost a 25% rise. Next is General Dynamics. November 1st, trading at $201, now $234. If you do the math, that's a 16% rise. Now for the British company, BAE Systems. Since November, their share price has surged 32%. You see the trend. What does it tell you? That war is good business, and CEOs in the West know this. In January, they were boasting about the prospect of war in Ukraine. Let me show you a report by In These Times. It's a magazine published in the US. They mention remarks made by 2 CEOs. First is Greg Hayes of Raytheon. Here's what he said during an earnings call, and I'm quoting, "The tensions in Eastern Europe, the tensions in the South China Sea, all of those things are putting pressure on some of the defense spending over there. So I fully expect we are going to see some benefit from it." The second is Jim Teichlet of Lockheed Martin. Here's what he told investors, and I'm quoting again. "If you look at the evolving threat level and the approach that some countries are taking, including North Korea, Iran, and through some of its proxies in Yemen and elsewhere, and especially Russia these days, there's renewed great power competition that does include national defense and threats to it." It doesn't get clearer than that. Western companies were predicting this war. They planned to make millions out of it, and chances are they will. More European states will up their defense spending. More weapons will pour into Ukraine. And who will produce those weapons? Western arms manufacturers. It is the unsaid rule of America's military-industrial complex. The war must go on. In August, the US pulled out of Afghanistan. 6 months later, a new war has broken out. Now, just to be clear, we're not blaming the US for starting this war. We're telling you how it benefits from it. More orders, more income, more taxes. And the best part, no direct American involvement. Ukraine is not like Afghanistan or Iraq. American soldiers are not fighting in this war. So all the money and none of the sacrifice. What's more, new buyers are entering the market, like Germany and Australia. Last year, the German defense budget was 47 billion euros. This year, it has been risen to 100 billion euros. Overnight, a new market has popped up. Same with Australia. Prime Minister Scott Morrison is planning to expand defense spending. Some of that money will go to Europe.
President Zelensky said, "Don't give me a ride, give me ammunition." And that's exactly what the Australian government has agreed to do. We will be committing $50 million to support both lethal and non-lethal defensive support for Ukraine. The overwhelming majority of that, that's some 70 million Australian dollars, will be in the lethal category. We're talking missiles, we're talking ammunition, we're talking supporting them in their defence of their own homeland in Ukraine. And we'll be doing that in partnership with NATO.
I'm not saying this military assistance is bad. Ukraine does need weapons. I'm saying this war should not become a business. We've seen it happen before. Western leaders needlessly extend conflicts. Instead of talks, they opt for violence. That should not happen in Ukraine. If this war drags on, if there is an insurgency after it, it must happen because the Ukrainians want it, not because Wall Street can make money. Meanwhile, Ukraine has made a big claim. It says Russia is using banned weapons. This is a Ukrainian army base that we're going to show you now, completely destroyed by the Russians. 70 Ukrainian soldiers died here. We have accessed an eyewitness video of this attack. Just take a look. That was a massive explosion. Bullets and tank bombs cannot cause that kind of damage. So what was it? Ukraine's ambassador to the United States says this was a vacuum bomb.
They are shooting us with missiles, ballistic missiles. They use the vacuum bomb today, which is actually prohibited by Geneva Convention. So, the devastation that Russia is trying to inflict on Ukraine is large, but we Ukrainians will resist. We are defending our home. We do not have any other option. We will not get tired. We will not stop. We will not surrender. We will continue defending our home. And it's not only our very motivated and capable military, not only our armed forces, but everyone.
So what is a vacuum bomb, also known as a thermobaric weapon? Vacuum bombs suck in oxygen from the atmosphere when they explode. They use the air to create long-lasting and high-temperature explosions. They can vaporize human bodies, crush internal organs, and reduce cities to rubble. That's how powerful they are. Ukraine claims that Russia is using them in this conflict, and that's not all. Moscow has been accused of deploying cluster bombs too. Two international humanitarian rights groups have made this claim. Cluster bombs have been banned by more than 100 countries, remember. A cluster bomb contains a number of submunitions or smaller bombs. It attacks by spraying these bombs all over a large area. Reports say Russia has used these cluster bombs on civilians in Ukraine. Several videos of such attacks have come out. In some cases, the casualties were significant. Allow me to show you some of those clips. The first one was captured from a car. The driver was just 100 meters away from a children's hospital. Suddenly, the car came under attack. That video was from Kharkiv. Reports say there were no aircrafts in the vicinity when the bombs went off. The only plausible explanation, we are told, is a cluster bomb. Here's another video. On the 25th of February, a kindergarten in Oka Trika was targeted. Multiple bombs struck the building simultaneously. Now look at what an eyewitness captured. This is believed to be a Russian missile, which looks a lot like a cluster bomb. Ukrainians are being attacked with banned weapons, they say. Ukraine's president says Russia is committing war crimes.
We call on all countries of the world to immediately and firmly react to such criminal tactics by the aggressor and declare that Russia is carrying out state terrorism. We demand to put terrorists to justice in international courts.
Zelensky is putting everything on the line to fight Russia, even his life. A British newspaper has made a big claim. It says 400 Russian mercenaries are in Kiev right now. What is their mission? To assassinate the Ukrainian president, they say. Who are these mercenaries? Reports say these are soldiers of the Wagner Group. It's a private Russian military force. It is run by one of the closest allies of Vladimir Putin. But many experts say the Wagner Group is very much a part of the Russian state. Look at their list of missions. The Wagner Group has a presence in Libya, a country currently gripped by a civil war. They've conducted operations in Syria, Mozambique, Mali, the Sudan and the Central African Republic. In Syria, the Wagner Group fought with the Russian military and supported the Assad regime. And in 2014, they also played a role in the annexation of Crimea. Now the Wagner Group is believed to be in Kiev, and their hit list does not just include the president of Ukraine. As many as 24 names are said to be on target. Russia, of course, is denying all such reports. It maintains that it is only striking military targets. Moscow is not finding many takers, though. On the world stage, it stands increasingly isolated. And countries around the world are seeing this. The attack on Ukraine, the isolation of Russia. So all of them are rethinking their strategies. Neutral states are rethinking non-alignment. Pacifist nations are raising armies again. The only victim of nuclear attacks, Japan, is talking about hosting nukes. Clearly, Putin's war has forced a rethink of policies that are almost a century old. We'll begin with Japan. In 1945, the United States dropped 2 nuclear bombs on Japan. Around 200,000 people were killed. Since then, Japan has advocated pacifism. They know the power of nuclear weapons. They know the evil of an atom bomb. Yet some Japanese leaders are thinking about it, like former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Here's what he said about hosting American nukes. In NATO, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands and Italy take part in nuclear sharing, hosting American nuclear weapons. We need to understand how security is maintained around the world and not consider it taboo to have an open discussion. This is what Shinzo Abe said. And just to be clear, this is not some local politician in Japan. This is their longest-serving prime minister and influential voice in the ruling party. Has Prime Minister Kishida responded to it? Well, he has. Kishida says hosting nukes is out of the question for Japan and that Japan's non-nuclear principles are sacred. But that's not the case for Belarus. They're diving into the Russian bear hug. This week, the Belarusian parliament passed a key legislation. What does it say? 2 major things. A, that Belarus can host Russian nuclear weapons. And B, that Russian troops can stay permanently on their soil. In other words, Belarus is becoming a Russian satellite state. And if that happens, other European nations may react, nations like Finland. Until now, they have remained non-aligned. But after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the Finns are rethinking. Let me show you what a new opinion poll found. 53% people backed joining the NATO, 28% opposed it, and 19% were unsure. More than 50,000 people signed a resolution asking Finland's parliament to debate this issue. What is the government saying? Finland's Prime Minister, Sanna Marin, has supported non-alignment. At the same time, she wants to keep her options open. She says if it comes to national security, she will apply for NATO membership. Switzerland, too, is making moves. On Monday, they announced joining the European Union sanctions on Russia. But the most consequential pivot, you could say, has come from Germany. Twice in the last century, they unleashed world wars, the Germans. Their belligerence led to large-scale violence. So after the Second World War, Germany withdrew into a shell. They spent little on the military. They took a back step in world politics. Basically, they became a reluctant power. But last week, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz made a U-turn. He is planning to spend $112 billion on defense. He is sending weapons to Ukraine. This is the return of German hard power. What about the so-called rogue states? How are they seeing this war? As a lesson, Ukraine handed over its nuclear weapons in 1994. 28 years later, they're under attack. What does that say to countries like North Korea and Iran? That nukes help. Both countries are blaming the US for this war. North Korea also tested a ballistic missile on Sunday, their 8th test this year. Kim Jong-un sees what is happening in Ukraine. He will draw the links between nukes and deterrence. So chances are he will hold on closely to those weapons. Where does that leave South Korea? A new poll found that 71% of the South Korean population wants a nuclear weapon. Technically, Seoul is part of the US nuclear umbrella. What does that mean? If needed, the US will deploy nukes to protect South Korea. But how reliable is that promise? Will America risk its own cities to protect Seoul? Many South Koreans do not want to take that chance. Same with Iran. We were told that a nuclear deal was within reach with Iran. Now the tone has changed. Iran says key issues are yet to be resolved. The Ayatollah is blaming America's, what he calls, mafia regime for Russia's war. The deal may still happen, but Iran will definitely play hardball. In conclusion, let me say this. Putin's invasion has busted a 21st century myth that war is impossible. If you're powerful enough, if your core interests are threatened, you can wage war. That is the message from the Russian invasion. So every country is rethinking its strategy. Some are hoping for alliance support, like Finland. Some are betting on a nuclear umbrella, like Belarus and Japan. Some are building their own defense, like Germany. Whatever the strategy, we can be sure of one thing. We are entering a new era of hard power politics.
Помахайте камерой.
They say truth is the first casualty of war. In the case of Ukraine, you could say empathy too has become a victim. An entire country is being bombed into submission. The targets don't know if they will survive another day. There's needless death and destruction. And all the world has to offer is condemnation. 400,000 people have fled Ukraine. Scores have died. Families have been torn apart. Children have been rendered homeless. Look at these images. A young boy has been separated from his father, who decided to stay in Kiev and fight Russian forces. He's 8 years old. He was rescued from the side of a road near the Polish border. With tears rolling down his eyes and his voice breaking with emotion, he described the grief that has gripped his family.
И папа будет продавать что-то, будет помогать нашим героям, нашим войскам, будет помогать может, даже будет воевать. Мы шли где-то 3 часа, и вот вы нас спасли. Я думала, что мы уже будем идти эти 2-3 дня.
Look at these images now. They're from Lviv. This mother was seen bidding a tearful farewell to her son. She's escaping to the border. The son has decided to stay back and defend the country.
We hope that it's going to be train to Poland. A free train with no tickets.
At the border, the scenes are equally distressing. This woman fled Kiev when the bombings began. She walked for 4 days to reach the Slovak border, then waited for another 3 days for her relatives to arrive. When she saw them, she could not hold back her tears.
My tady čekáme už 3 dní na nich a oni 4 dní jeli na cestě sem přes hranice. Ale konečně už dorazili, to je hrůza, co se děje s tím zasraným Putinem. Ať chcípne, prostě je to strašně, co se dělá proti lidstvu.
Back in Kiev, the people who decided to stay back have taken it upon themselves to fight the Russians. Like this woman, she was seen launching a Molotov cocktail on a Russian tank.
Давай, давай, блядь, хуярим нахуй! Кидай, блядь, кидай, кидай, блядь, кидай! Антоны!
In the Chernihiv region in northern Ukraine, people are blocking roads without any arms, stopping Russian tanks from entering their cities, all the while singing the Ukrainian national anthem. In the border city of Melitopol, people are risking their lives in a similar fashion, armed with nothing more than slogans. They were seen forming a human shield, trying to stop Russian tanks with their bare hands. As the battle rages on the streets, subways have become bomb shelters. At one such metro station in Kiev, a man was seen playing Ukraine's anthem on a trumpet. Similar scenes from another bomb shelter in Kiev. People singing for life, waving flashlights and trying to uplift their spirits. This next video was shared by Ukraine's defense ministry. The man you see is a singer. He is now volunteered to fight, dressed in military gear and armed with a gun. He sang on the streets of Kiev to rally his countrymen against the Russians.
Ой, у лузі червона калина похилилася.
And then we have stories like these. This man is a Russian citizen. He was seen burning his passport at a protest in Kiev. He said he was ashamed of what his country was doing.
Гори эта хуйня в аду. Простите, братья, стыдно.
In Georgia, another Russian activist was seen burning his passport and telling Ukrainians that he stands with them.
Putin! Хуйло! Putin! Хуйло! Putin! Хуйло! Putin! Хуйло!
And these are not isolated incidents. This seems to have become a movement of sorts. Social media is flooded with videos of Russian citizens, activists, refugees burning their passports in solidarity with Ukraine, denouncing the actions of President Vladimir Putin.
No.
Nope.
Not anymore. Not anymore.
I'm Australian.
You can be born in Russia, you can be born in...
These stories are moving. They're also symbolic. They tell you how this is Putin's war, not Russia's. He wanted it, perhaps not his people. We're wrapping the show with that. We'll continue tracking the developments in Ukraine, and we hope for the safe return of Indian students and the safety of Ukrainian citizens. We're leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.